Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carter Walker, and I love talking about movies, music, comics, and games. And I just watched Scream 6 for the second time tonight. Thank the good Lord for $5 Tuesday. And I have some thoughts about it. My thoughts have definitely changed since my last review. I've put a little bit more kind of thought and prayer into. No, I'm just kidding. I've kind of put a lot more thought into like my rankings and my review of Scream 6, and a lot of my thoughts have changed. So I just wanted to go and rank all 6 of the Scream movies because I am a massive fan of the Scream franchise. Oh shoot, I have a poster back there. I got Ghostface that my fiance gave me because I'm like 8 years old at heart. But I am a big fan of the Scream franchise. I watched the first one in high school, and it was like very instrumental to my overall like love of film. It really got me into a lot more of the 90s, 80s, 70s era of horror movies. Very influential to like my taste in humor, my taste in slashers, and kind of what I come to expect from the Scream franchise. So let's get right into it. Just a heads up, there will be spoilers for all these movies, so just kind of before you get into this, just make sure you're aware. I will be spoiling literally everything about most of these movies, so just keep that in mind, including Scream 6. Coming in at number 6 is what most people would put at the bottom of the list from what I've seen, and that is Scream 3. By no means is this a bad movie. I mean, it is a far better horror movie, a far better threequel, closing of a trilogy than most other horror movies that I know of and horror franchises. I mean, it's when Scream 3 is your worst movie, I've heard this said before on the internet, if Scream 3 is your worst horror movie, you're doing pretty well for yourself. You can't really complain. I just think that it is the one that feels the weirdest. It definitely feels the most meta, and not quite in a good way. And then coming in with just how it all wraps up with Roman really kind of irks me. I don't think it really quite shakes out with how it's supposed to be. However, I think, the twist with Roman being the killer isn't very good. There's a lot of, logic gaps here and just stuff that doesn't quite make sense with that. But I think the performances are all great. I love how Dewey and Gale get more to do in this movie. I love how they are able to kind of take center stage, and how Sydney kind of is a recluse again, living with her father out in the middle of nowhere. That all makes sense. It feels like natural character progression. And then as far as the new characters come, none of them really wow me besides maybe Detective Kincaid. I feel like he's played very well by Patrick Dempsey, and he's, very likable, very charismatic. So I enjoy the inclusion of him in the franchise for sure. And I think that, Scream 3, when you watch it, it's definitely the low point of the franchise, but, it's still watchable. It's still a good movie. I just don't think it's my favorite, and it comes down to a lot of logic gaps, the killer reveal. I think everything to do with Roman, and, some of the kills aren't as good. It's not as thrilling as the final act, and, for the closing out of the trilogy, I just think that there's a lot of missed opportunities here, things that could have been improved upon. There's definitely worse movies out there. However, it's easily the worst Scream movie for me. Coming in at number 5 is my most controversial pick, maybe on this list. One that I've seen a lot of people on the internet hate on me for, but
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you something.
We don't care.
It's Scream 2. I genuinely don't see the love for this movie. I gotta be honest. Every time I watch this movie, I feel like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get it, dude. I'm gonna see what all my friends see in this movie. I'm gonna see what everyone on the internet sees in this movie. And I sit down and I'm like, yeah, I don't get it. It's not good. For me, Randy, they took one of the best characters in the first one and completely just made him dialed up to 11, and it does not work in the slightest. He is so freaking annoying in this movie, and it bothers me so bad. He just randomly does accents and does all this weird stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's him in the first one, but it's just like dialed up to 11, and he's not even in the whole movie. And so you get, what you got all of Randy in the first movie in the span of 90 minutes to 2 hours in the span of 30 minutes, and it just is like they're force feeding you Randy. And I like Jamie Kennedy as an actor. I think he does a great job with what he's been given. I just think that, I'll kind of get in later on the list, he's just written not very well here, and it's just dialed up to 11. It doesn't really work. However, I still love the, rules sequence in this movie. There's rules to surviving a sequel. I feel like that works very well. All of the kills here are, they up the ante, they up the gore, which is awesome, much appreciated. The chase scenes are great. For me, it's just the new characters, again, aren't as good. And then when it comes to the killer reveal of Mickey and Mrs. Loomis, I kind of go back and forth which one I like more. But I feel like Mickey, just when he dials it up to 11, it works for me. Timothy Olyphant's performance works. However, the reveal of Mickey as the killer incredibly disappointing. He's like not even in the movie for like 30 to 45 minutes before his reveal. Like, they do this song and dance scene, which is so bad. Don't even get me started with Derek. Goodness gracious. And then there's the whole movie, and then Mickey takes his mask off, and it's like, surprise, it's Mickey. And it's so weird. It makes zero sense. And the whole theater subplot with Sid, doesn't really do it for me. And same with like Derek giving his letters away is just like weird. And I don't know. It feels like it's trying to recapture a bit of the magic of the first one, and it doesn't do it as well. And the newbies aren't as good. That's a recurring theme you'll find on this list for me, that I always struggle with the new characters. But I feel like, Dewey and Gale are peak Dewey and Gale here. I love Dewey. One of my favorite scenes in the franchise, when his theme plays for the first time and he's explaining to Gale that, he's using his IQ as a way to hide his, as a way to like distract his enemies. That cracks me up every time. But I just don't think it's as funny as the first one. I don't think it's as scary or as thrilling as the first one. But I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. I can still put this on and enjoy it. I still think it's a solid 3.5, 4-star movie. Like I said, every Scream movie to me is great. They're all 3.5 stars and above. Coming in at number 4, we have Scream 4. Now this, 2 and 3, 2, 3, 4, as far as rankings go, are always in competition for second place. I really enjoy Scream 4. I think it's very underrated. I think, apart from the color grading, it's a really great sequel. The meta commentary is amazing. Something that also goes for Scream 2 and 3 is that the meta commentary is top notch. It's perfect. I love it every time. And everything to do with the movies in 2, 3, and 4 is just absolutely pitch perfect. How in 4 you have Charlie Walker, who just wants to, make his love of horror movies a reality, and then you have Jill Roberts, who wants to be famous. She needs fans, not friends. One of the best killers in the franchise, and every time I watch this movie, every pitfall I have for 4 is just blown out of the water by Jill's motivation. It's so ahead of its time for 2011 that it just really gets to me. It's like, wow, Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven knew exactly what they were doing, and it's almost eerie how they nailed how people think of social media nowadays. You need fans. This is ironic since I'm posting this on YouTube to 100 subscribers, but it's insane how it goes that way and how the movie plays out like that. And I love the kills in this movie. I think they're all great, and I actually enjoy the newbies here. I think Charlie and Robbie are funny. I really enjoy Jill and Kirby. They are the standouts here especially. And they make it very interesting. Sydney is in this movie, but she's not, incredibly important until the last half. And then Dewey and Gale kind of carry the first half, but then are kind of taken off the case and going into the back half, which is my one issue with this movie. People hate on it. The color grading is terrible. The cops are goofy. It has a few tonal issues, but honestly, watching all the Scream movies, it's hard to balance horror and comedy. Sometimes you just get a few odd lines here and there, a few odd scenes, but overall, I love this movie. I think it, again, is severely underrated. The opening is creative if it does get a little redundant sometimes, but I think the kills are great. Ghostface is great in this one, and it just does a great job of always moving. It's always moving forward, and as soon as, the Stabathon starts, the movie is on. It goes, and it's just one night of chaos and terror, and it doesn't breathe at all. It has smaller scenes, but it's always setting up in the back of your mind okay, who's the killer? It could be this, it could be that. And then the meta commentary about remakes is hilarious. I love it, and it just really works for me every time I watch this movie. I tend to like it more and more. Going into our top 3 is something that just changed tonight, and that's going to be Scream 6. I just got out of Scream 6 for the second time, and if you'd asked me on Friday if this was my favorite sequel, I would have said yes. I would have said, yeah, Scream 6 is my favorite sequel. The kills are incredible. They are very gnarly. Even seeing it again, and I knew it was coming, I still flinched at a lot of the kills, especially the one with Ethan where they stab it in his mouth and twist it, and then the one with Detective Bailey where she stabs it in his eye. I mean, the kills in this one are nuts. It's pretty nasty stuff. I love how they just dial it up to 11, especially with the opening scene. My favorite opening scene since the original, probably tied with how it just subverts your expectations. You have Tony Revolori unmasking himself immediately after he kills Samara Weaving, and then you kind of follow him back. And I think that this movie does a great job with kind of changing the formula just enough. However, it changes the formula enough to a certain point to make you think that it's going to be a completely different Scream movie, and then it just reverts back to the same old Scream bag of tricks where you have a character who gets stabbed a million times but lives, and it just can't kill any of the returning characters unless it's Dewey for some reason. And for me, that kind of irked me. That really bothered me on rewatch, because you have these scenes with Gale and Mindy and Chad where they have big death scenes. You know, you have Gale literally having like a death monologue where she's like, tell Sid he didn't get me, tell Sid he didn't get me, and then she like dies and they're crying, and the paramedics like, we got a pulse. That just feels so weird and out of place to me. It felt like, I've said this a million times, like they had it where she died and they test screened it and it tested negative, and they're like, crap, we got to keep Gale alive. Or with Chad, how he gets stabbed 35 times into a shish kebab and then just walks it off. Or Mindy, how she is just totally able to like make it out of that alive after being stabbed a few times on the subway, and then she's up and running around, and they're like, I've seen people online like, oh yeah, they say she's on drugs, like they explain it. Well, yeah, but she's still running around and like talking and talking and talking. For me, that's the biggest issue with the movie, is just the writing, how much plot armor the characters have, the killers, their motives after the reveal. I feel like the new characters in this movie especially just do not get any time to breathe at all. This feels like Scream 2, where, you know, you have a killer, you know, in Scream 2 it's Mickey, in Scream 6 it's Quinn, that is, you know, like killed off or just like written out of the movie early on, and they bring him back for the last part. And, you know, while Mickey definitely gives a better performance than Quinn, in my opinion, I feel like it doesn't work for me, because you don't get to spend any time with that character. You don't get to spend any time with Quinn. You spend a lot of time with Detective Bailey and some time with Ethan, but you still don't know enough about them besides they're Richie's family and they want revenge on Sam and Tara. Watching the movie again, it worked a little bit better for me just because I knew what was coming and I could enjoy their performances more after the reveal. However, I still think that some of Scream 6 is a little rushed. It definitely could have used maybe some more time to breathe before the reveal. They definitely should have killed some of the characters. And I hear people saying, like, they're just saving it for a bloodbath in 7. Well, weren't they saving the characters from 5 for a bloodbath in 6? I mean, think about it. And then also, people are defending, you know, Mindy in her franchise rules scene. I didn't like that at all. It kind of fell flat for me. It wasn't funny. And also how she says that Tara and Sam aren't safe. No one is safe. And then they all make it out of the movie. People, again, are calling that genius writing. It subverts your expectations. It's just lazy and hypocritical, in my opinion. It sets you up for something that you're not getting, which, yes, is subverting expectations, but at the sacrifice of logic, believability, and, like, plot sense. For me, it doesn't really work at all, in my opinion. And however, I do enjoy Sam and Tara a lot more in this movie, and Chad gets a lot more to do. I think Mindy worked better in 5. They overuse her a little bit in this movie. She's written a little too aggressive towards everybody, and it just kind of comes off as douchey, as cocky and everything, and she just talks down to everyone around her, and you just kind of end up rooting for her to die. I mean, that's how it was for me. She's just so cocky, talks down to every single person, and it doesn't work for me. And it also has some tonal issues. Sometimes the comedy and the horror aren't balanced well. However, that all being said, I still really enjoy the movie. I think the kills are incredible. The dynamic between Sam and Tara is great. Chad is a great heart of the movie. All the performances are great. I think that, you know, Dermot Mulroney as Detective Bailey does a great job. Kirby is great. It's awesome to see her back. I had a ton of fun seeing her back. You know, the whole franchise thing could have been expanded upon. Not enough meta commentary in this one, but I like how, you know, there's so many Easter eggs with the Ghostface shrine. I thought that was pretty cool. So all in all, I can see myself rewatching this one, and it would either go way up or a little bit down. This is the one that can move the most. It's the most flexible. Probably give it a 4-star right now. Coming in at number 2, we have Scream 5, and I know a lot of people do not like this movie. I was laughing so hard as soon as I called out toxic fandom, because a lot of people that I interact with, I mean, going to high school when the Star Wars sequels were out was a bloodbath, dude. You see toxic fandom in the halls, like, people just cannot get over anything. But I think that the meta commentary in this is great. It makes up for, you know, the last, 11 years without a Scream movie, and talks about requels and elevated horror, and it does a great job of it. I do think that there's some elements that are lacking, like, it doesn't have a very high body count, there's no chase scenes. I really enjoy the third act. I love the third act. I think getting into the movie, once Wes and Deputy Hicks are attacked, the movie just ramps up and doesn't stop, and also has a lot of emotion in it as well, with Dewey, and seeing how he deals with moving on from Gale, and being, back in this town. I love their scenes together, even if they're short. And I just love, his sacrifice. Even though it doesn't make sense logically, like how could Amber carve up Dewey? It doesn't make sense. I love how, Dewey's has his sacrifice, has his moment, and it sucks that he dies. He's definitely missed in Scream 6 personally. But it's nice that they have stakes in this movie. Nice that they were willing to kill off a character. And I think that all the deaths in this movie are very well done. They're all very brutal. They all stick with you, just like in Scream 6. I think that's a recurring theme that Radio Silence does great. Directed very well, it's written very well, and I have a really big soft spot for Jack Quaid. So as soon as he showed up, I was like super hyped that he was in it. I had no idea he was the killer. People were saying that they guessed it. I mean, I think it's just me seeing him as Huey from The Boys. He's just so like innocent and lovable, and then he just starts butchering people. I didn't see it. I mean, that was just me though. But I really, really liked this movie. I think it's very tight in the third act as well. There's maybe a few plot conveniences, logic gaps with people surviving, just like Scream 6. But it does a great job of showing us what the Stab movies and what, the Scream movies would have been like if it was real. How Richie is like a cultist with Amber, and there's people that are like worshiping those serial killers, because we see that today. But I love Jack Quaid and Mikey Madison's performance once they're unmasked. It's so much fun, and they're just so crazy that it reminds me so much of Billy and Stu from the first one. And it just makes me so happy that they're back in Stu's house, that a lot of this one might be nostalgia, but they just pulled at it perfectly. And I've rewatched this one quite a few times. I really enjoy this movie. I have such a great time with it. And honestly, I'd give it like 4.5 stars. My favorite besides our number one pick. Coming into my number one spot, my favorite Scream movie is, of course, the original. The original is my favorite horror movie of all time. It's one of my 5 favorite movies of all time. I absolutely adore this movie. I can't get enough of this movie. I've seen it maybe like upwards of 10 times, maybe, and I just always come back to it. It's so much fun. It does such a good job playing with the formula, playing with your expectations, the classic whodunit. The pacing is perfect. There's always something going on to keep you guessing. You don't know who it is. There's always someone getting attacked, always a reveal happening, and the characters are just so likable and charismatic. I mean, even from Sid, she's the best final girl of all time in my opinion. They did such a great job of writing her character to be just so strong and believable, and just so like undaunted by what's happening in front of her. And of course, you can't even talk about Scream without the meta commentary and the effect it had on the genre. The meta commentary on slashers and horror in general, with all the tropes and everything, is just so well done, and it's just so much fun. It has such a great time, poking fun at horror while also being such a great love letter to the genre, that it just blends it together so well. This is like lightning in a bottle. Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson created something perfect. In my opinion, Scream is like one of the few perfect movies out there. And yeah, it has its faults. Maybe it's a little like, I can't even think of a fault right now. I just really love this movie. It's a 5-star movie in my opinion. Again, one of my favorite movies of all time. I think every single actor and actress here just gives it their all. I think maybe if I had to give this movie a gripe, it's that some of the deaths just are stabbings, but it's fine. I mean, in my opinion, I'm having so much fun watching this movie. I'm so invested. I don't really care. I have such a great time seeing just a killer who is bumbling and is clumsy, and it's believable when you see people fight back, because you see him get hit with a beer bottle, hit with a fridge door. You see him trip over stuff. He gets flipped by Sydney. It's easy to see that this is a killer that is like so believable, and that's what kind of makes it more scary. Is it could be anybody under that mask, because they're not like cold and calculating. They're smart, but also they're very clumsy, and you can physically overpower them. However, they do have like weapons and knives, everything like that. And I think the whodunit aspect of it is always very engaging, especially because you don't want any character to be Ghostface. You love Sydney. She's a great final girl. Dewey is just so lovable and goofy. Gale is very headstrong and maybe a little unlikable in this movie, but you still respect her because she's, very hardworking. She has a great work ethic. And then Matthew Lillard as Stu is just so over the top and so fun that you might see him as Ghostface. I didn't, honestly. I kind of figured it was Billy just because he's like the pick, for Ghostface. And it might just be, seeing it again at my age, just seeing like, oh yeah, he's definitely Ghostface, because you can see the tropes. But when Stu was revealed, it was so fun because I was like, maybe it's Randy. Maybe Randy snapped, because he is a little crazy in this movie. He's a little kooky. Jamie Kennedy does a great job bringing to life, Randy, the movie character, the nerdy guy that a lot of people can relate to. They do a great job of making this movie believable, also very funny, but also kind of very thrilling. It's very horrifying, seeing people get butchered, their throats slit, they're stabbed, they're like gutted. And the opening scene, of course, is iconic. It's one of the best opening scenes of all time, in my opinion. And, the whole movie works together to just be something so great, so timeless, that every single person I've talked to knows the first time they watched Scream. No matter what you think going into it, you remember the first time you watched Scream, you know what Scream is, and if you're a Scream fan, the first one is usually your favorite. I mean, if you like other Scream movies more than this one, props to you, man. But I really love the first one. Again, my favorite horror movie of all time. Wes Craven will be dearly missed, but I'm very glad that they created the most iconic killer for me in my life. I know there's more iconic killers out there. Is Ghostface. It's just so interesting, so iconic that, it's just teenagers picking up the mantle of being a serial killer, and Billy and Stu do such a great job. Matthew Lillard is my favorite Ghostface. He just gives such a hammy performance once he is revealed. He's just like screaming like, "These days you gotta have a sequel." And he's like screaming and like pointing the gun at Sydney, like, your mother was no Sharon Stone. I can quote this movie over and over and over again. And Matthew Lillard just gives one of my all-time favorite performances here. I would love to just have him come back as Stu, no matter how ridiculous, just because it means I can get another hammy Matthew Lillard performance. This guy blew it out of the water. He knocked it out of the park. And Scream 1996 is my favorite horror movie of all time and my favorite Scream movie ever made. So that's my ranking of the Scream movies. What's your ranking? I'm curious. Do you think I'm an apostate for ranking Scream 2 so low and Scream 5 so high? Should I be murdered? Should I be killed? Should I be stabbed? Let me know. Have you seen Scream 6 yet? What did you think about it? Be sure to let me know down in the below in the comments. I reviewed Scream 6 with a regular review and a spoiler review. Feel free to check them out. In the meantime, I'm Carter, and have a great rest of your day.